Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scot McKay.
Hello and welcome again to yet another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. My name is Scot McKay, at Scot McKay on both Clubhouse and Twitter, Real Scot McKay on Instagram. Scot McKay, Scot with one T, SCOTMCKAY is what you search on YouTube to find all the video stuff. MountainTopPodcast.com is the website, and I'm still inviting a lot of you guys to join us on the Facebook group, which is called the Mountaintop Summit, where you'll find a lot of guys who are interested in getting better with women and better in their lives in general and being better men. Guys, you know, one of the things I don't tell you enough is this isn't your typical men's group where we all whine and moan to each other about our problems with the women in our lives. This is where we are men of good humor. We're about action and solutions and really having a lot of fun. So go ahead and join us there on Facebook at the Mountaintop Summit. With me today is a friend of mine. His name is Justin Long, and interestingly enough, he is most well known for a series of books about being a horse doctor's husband. It's just wildly popular. And yet, the reason why he's joining us today is mostly because of his newest book, which is called The Righteous Rage of a 10-Year-Old Boy. And this particular topic indeed has been a long time coming. That topic is why men find it so hard to heal. Justin Long from Gainesville, Florida. How's it going, man?
Hi, Scott. It's great to be on the show. It is going great.
Excellent, man. How are the horses?
The horses are challenging, as always.
How's the horse doctor wife?
The horse doctor wife is amazing. And I will say that is probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me in my life is finding her.
Well, I'll tell you what. My wife is no horse doctor. She's a heck of a homeschool mom, but she is the greatest thing who has ever happened to me, too. So, yeah, man, at least we're on the same page there. That's good.
That's right.
Today's topic is one I've wanted to cover for a long time, and I'll tell you and the guys listening exactly why at the same time. Isn't that convenient? A lot of times we think of therapy as being about healing and kind of dealing with the past, unpacking what happened there, and fixing something that was broken. And as a coach, like other coaches, we all kind of like to think of ourselves as forward thinking. We're not talking about fixing something that's broken. We're talking about going from good to great, looking towards the future, making ourselves excellent. And that has such a nice, almost romantic ring to it. Yet, if I'm mature in my assessment of what really goes on when I work with guys, you know, every day, Justin, a lot of it does involve healing. It's okay to talk about healing. It's okay to admit we have wounds that have to be healed in order to move on, in order to have the kind of future we want. And sometimes it just feels too Pollyanna-ish for us to say, hey, you know what? The past is gone. The future is blue sky. Hoo-yah, let's go do this thing. Really, a few steps have to be taken sometimes before we can get to that point. Isn't that right?
That is true. And it's no different than training your body if you're trying to get in shape for a sporting event of some sort, or, you know, if you want to get into triathlons or whatever, you have to train your body to get used to certain things. And we do the same things with our minds. If we want to be successful, positive thinkers that are action takers and good decision makers and people who are happy and confident, we have to work on our minds sometimes, the same that we would work on our body.
Yeah, it's kind of like you have to clear out the obstacles before, you know, you can go racing on this track.
Right, exactly.
Analogy, right?
That's it, exactly. And it's something that oftentimes we're not even aware that there are things that need to be addressed. Like I went through most of my 20s and early 30s without having any real idea of why I wasn't having the success that I wanted to have in life. And it took someone else helping shine a spotlight on my obstacles in order for me to even see them.
And this is part of what inspired your book, right?
That is exactly right. I thought that I had a rage problem and tried to work on that. And that's when I discovered what was really going on with me.
So tell us a little bit more about your backstory and a little bit more about why you finally felt like, hey, I had to write a book about my experiences and share this with other guys.
I started out with a set of really emotionally dysfunctional parents. I had a dad that ruled with an iron fist, high expectations that I could never meet. And, he would assign me all kinds of chores. And then when he came home from work, we would go inspect all of the things that I had done that day. And then I would get a spanking for all of my shortcomings. If it was the firewood stack and there was wood sticking out one side or the other, or it wasn't flat all the way across the top, I would get a spanking for that. And whatever it was, I never got a congratulations, you did a good job. I always got punished. And as a young child, that made me form beliefs about myself that no matter how hard I try and how hard I work, I'm going to fall short of the expectation and that I'm going to get in trouble. And that kind of stuff never really crossed my mind. As soon as I left home and joined the Army and went off to seek my fortune in the world, I never thought about that again. But those beliefs that I formed about myself as a young child as a result of all of those experiences, and it was thousands of those things, those things became insecurities that formed my relationships with people and my reactions to things. And so I was carrying that around with me all the way through my adult life. And that negative self-belief is what kept me from getting anywhere in life. And it wasn't until I ended up in therapy and was able to, have a guide to take me through the process of understanding the why, then I could fix the what. And the what is really the crux of it all for me. It's that understanding of who I am had to change. And when I was able to take that from a negative to a positive, that changed everything in my life. Like the dynamics suddenly shifted and I had a whole new understanding of who I was. And that's the crux of this book is understanding that if you feel a certain kind of way about yourself and it's not the way that you want to feel, that it's possible to change that. I didn't know that for most of my life, and the profound impact that that's had on my life was something that I really felt compelled to share with other people, that, you're not stuck the way you are, that you have the power to change. All you need is some direction.
Yeah, and like you said, and thank you, by the way, for being very vulnerable in the best way possible and talking about this, a lot of guys don't even know where to start. I mean, we go through our childhoods thinking, okay, well, that seemed relatively normal. I'm still here. I don't have any visible scars. And so we think there's nothing wrong with this. This is the way it's supposed to be. Or perhaps we do sense something's wrong, but we don't even know where to start. I mean, why am I like this? What is this way I'm even being compared to everybody else? Sometimes we just have a blind spot there. As you were talking, of course, you were mentioning your father kind of raised a bar of absolute perfection. He would ask you to do things, perhaps order you to do things, put you to work around the house doing chores, and nothing was ever good enough. And what that can lead a kid to feel like is, hey, you know what? I'm just inadequate. Perfection is what's going to be acceptable around here. I can never do that. I'm always failing. And therefore, there's never any celebration of something good that happened. Anything that you do right, the best you can expect is, well, peace temporarily around the house because at least you did this one right. But, if something is substandard in your father's eyes, or something doesn't get done, or God help you, you don't get an A+ at school, or you don't make the roster for your basketball team, there may literally be hell to pay. And yeah, that's really destructive to a kid's self-esteem, isn't it?
It really is. And to my adult life, I went into the workforce with this big giant chip on my shoulder, thinking that I had to prove myself every day over and over in everything that I did. So, I went out seeking that approval, that external validation that I was good enough. And if I didn't get it, I was resentful about that. I would have an attitude, but I was a terrible teammate in my jobs. I demanded recognition from my supervisors constantly over everything that I did. Like everything was a competition. Every day it was a fight to the death to prove to the world that I'm good enough and I deserve this and I deserve more. And, if you've ever worked with somebody like that, that's the wild overachiever that is, combative about everything, it's a very toxic person to have in your environment, and no matter where it is. And I was that guy for a long time, and I was blind to it, and I didn't understand that. When my boss says, Justin, you failed to count the 2-inch pipe when you were doing the inventory last week, that he's not saying, Justin, you're a horrible piece of shit and you're out of here. He's saying, Justin, you forgot to count the 2-inch pipe. But I'm taking it as it's the end of the world and I am not good enough, and that, it's all of the judgment that I'm carrying forward from my past. And it's all an unconscious thing that gets triggered by any sort of criticism because I was incapable of receiving criticism. But now that I understand that, it's very, very different when I interact with people, and it's much more positive. And I've made so much more progress in the world in my relationships with other people in business. It's unbelievable.
Wow. You know, the key word that jumped out at me was approval seeking, because it's the first thing I thought of, and I was going to broach that subject. When expectations are so high for us as kids and anything less than perfection is just not tolerated, then we've never really experienced victory.
That's right.
There's no such thing as winning. There's only a passing grade and failure. And when you've gone your entire life not ever being able to celebrate anything, and nothing you've ever done has ever been good enough, you've never been given credit for achieving anything, you go through life seeking that because it's a basic human emotional need. And the most disappointing and perhaps heartbreaking thing about going through life being an approval seeker is people do the exact opposite when they sense you're like that. When they sense you're this person who's going around saying, hey, look at me, I need to be appreciated. Hey, did I do a good job? Are you willing to be my friend? Do you like me? Is this good enough? People kind of withhold their approval from you because you're trying too hard, you know?
Definitely.
It's just a vortex of doom socially. And we often do have a blind spot about it. And in case it isn't obvious already, I spent most of my teens and early 20s suffering from the same affliction. So full disclosure there. Go ahead.
Oh man, that's pinging on some feelings right there. I definitely get it.
Yeah,
and
I pulled the trigger, didn't I?
But it's absolutely true. The harder you seek that approval, the less likely people are to give it to you. But another challenge that comes along with that mindset is that when you're constantly seeking approval and you're never getting it, you don't know how to receive it when you do get it. And I struggled with that mightily once I finally got to a point where I wasn't trying so hard and people were accepting and approving. I didn't know what to do with that. Like, this is a strange thing that's happening to me. But it wasn't just with people in the workplace, too. I would do the same thing in my pursuit of women and female companionship. I sought external validation through sex all through my 20s. And I have a multitude of friends who do the same thing. You know, I've got a buddy named Stevie that we talk about this on a regular basis, and his trying to heal from the challenges. But every time you see him, he's got a stunningly beautiful woman on his arm, and it's never the same one twice because he's seeking that validation of acceptance from someone else. And once you get that, it only works for a few days, and then you have to do it again and do it again and do it again. And that's another trap that I got sucked into. And I never understood that someone else's approval is never going to make me feel good about myself, that I needed my own approval.
Well, let's be honest here, okay? A lot of guys heard everything you just said, and they're stuck on one beautiful woman after another, which doesn't sound like a bad life to a lot of these guys. Doesn't sound like such a bad life to me. A lot of guys are like, hey, you know, maybe I should become more of an approval seeker if it's going to land me one beautiful woman after another. So I think we need to talk a little bit more about this. I mean, the idea of being an approval seeker and then getting to the point where you relax from that. You let go this aching need for people to approve of you, and are content not only with your accomplishments, but with people's reaction to what you've done, be it good, bad, or indifferent. It does have a cathartic effect, I think. Although I totally respect and acknowledge what you said about when you've reached that state, it's new to you to know what to do with that approval. You know, you say, oh, I don't deserve it, or, oh, it was nothing, or thank you. Now, approve of me of this too. If you think I did a good job here, don't you think I did a good job with this also? I mean, for better or worse, mostly worse, right? It can take a variety of different directions in terms of what someone would do with that approval psychologically. So I think we need to talk more about this idea of getting beautiful women because I let go of that approval seeking, even though there may be some vestiges of it still there that negatively affect my ability to hold down a relationship with a woman and keep her interested. Kind of to seed this conversation, I'm imagining that your friend Stevie, and perhaps you also, were more charming, and your masculinity was able to shine through a little better, more effectively when you weren't trying to get approval from people and you felt better about your own accomplishments and were more confident, etc. But as women got to know you, some of these holes in the armor started becoming more apparent. Am I on the right track there?
Mostly, but I would say if you look at Stevie from the 100-foot away view, Stevie is a good-looking guy. He's in shape. He's got the nice car. He's got a great job. He is the most smooth, charming guy you've ever met in your life. And that is a persona that he has crafted his entire life just for that very reason, to get people to tell him that he's amazing and he's wonderful. But until he can believe that himself, Stevie believes that he's a big, giant piece of crap and that he's not ever going to be good enough. And if that's what it is, the endless line of beautiful women is never going to make him feel better about himself. He's just going to keep trying because it works for an hour or two. But it's like any drug. If you're doing alcohol or cocaine or gambling or whatever it is, it starts off working reasonably well, but it has diminishing returns. And the longer you go, the less you get out of it. And at the end of the day, if whatever it is isn't working, you can look like you've got it going on from the outside, but if you don't feel like you have it going on the inside, you're never going to be happy.
Well, I don't think that's gender specific either. As much as we love talking to our male audience around here about themselves and ourselves, a lot of women we meet out there, a lot of guys are going to nod their head and raise their hand going, yep, I've been there and done this one. A lot of the women we meet out there have awful self-esteems. They think horribly about themselves, even though they're gorgeous and sweet and wonderful in just about every way. We can't talk them off the ledge of thinking that they're horrible people and that they're not worthy. So this is something that we mutually experience as a human problem here in this culture, isn't it, Justin?
It really is. But I think that women are famous for that. And because it's not a masculine idea, we don't ever talk about the fact that men have the exact same challenges. And I think that's where the trap is, because we have such an ultra masculine ideal that we're trying to live up to that we don't feel like it's okay to talk about these feelings to anybody. We can't even admit it to ourselves, much less someone else, and say it out loud that, I kind of feel like an asshole for what happened yesterday and the day before that and the day before that. We don't ever say that. We have to put on the false bravado. But none of that stuff ever gets us anywhere except alone and miserable because we can't ever make a real connection with somebody. And I think the freedom comes from not only being able to heal from these things with the help of a professional, but also from being able to talk openly about it and not worry about someone else judging us for having a negative thing going on in our head. Because the truth is, everybody has got emotional challenges of some sort or another. And if you feel like you're trying to compare yourself to someone else who seems to be perfect, you just don't know them well enough.
Oh, man, that's absolutely the case. I talk about that a lot. I have what I have termed the cartoon bubble effect, where especially we here in Western culture, where we can camouflage most of our problems, at least externally to the rest of the world, through wealth and fashion and a nice car and makeup and a haircut. Deep down, everybody's got their own skeletons in their closet, things that they've done that they're ashamed of, habits, thoughts, dirty deeds that they would just never admit to anyone. And it's not like we all go around with a cartoon bubble of sorts visible over our heads, announcing to the whole rest of the world what's really on our minds, what our fears, what our phobias, our foibles, what all those things are. And so we're left looking at everybody else around us going, oh, well, they're pretty much perfect. I'm the only slob around here. I'm the only screw up. And you're right. Men in particular just will not ask for help. We're just too macho. And you have a very key word in the very title of your book. The righteous rage of a 10-year-old boy. And that is one loaded title, my good man. Nowadays, men in particular are accused of rage. Men are angry, men are violent, and it's kind of anti-male, anti-masculine imagery, kind of a weaponized term to cast us all as villains just for being male. And you have paired the word rage with righteous, which of course indicates, hey, it's okay for us to feel this. It's deserved. We get to be someone who's raging inside. But is it really fair to say that all men are raging and that it's a bad thing and that we should, for lack of a better way to put it, shame the victim for this? I mean, obviously the rage doesn't feel all that great, but if it's righteous and if it's something that's very common to men, then what is the real nature of all this? Is it something we should fight, something we should embrace, something we really need to get over, something we need to apologize for, something we need to admit causes us to be terrible people and just hashtag do better? What's your take on this concept of rage and how men should wrestle with it?
I think it's really important to realize that anger is a topical emotion. And because we've been raised from being toddlers, taught to hide our feelings, hide our pain, especially. Big boys don't cry when they fall down and scrape their knee. From that point forward, we're trying to be as tough as possible. And usually when I feel rage, it's a secondary thing to some other feeling that I have, which is generally some feeling of inferiority or not being able to match the expectation of what's going on.
How about powerlessness?
Absolutely powerlessness. That's one of my worst nightmares, is to be in a position where I don't have any control over what's going on. But that's because I grew up being controlled and dominated in every way possible. And I associated the idea of being a man with being able to dominate and control someone else and to crush them the same way that my dad crushed me. And the reality is that has nothing to do with being a man or having value as a leader or anything like that. My understanding of being a man today, on the opposite side of what it used to be, is that I am true to who I am, no matter what anybody else thinks. And I have enough confidence to not waver in that I have the strength to stand by my values and my convictions and not try to impress somebody else when they have some other expectation of me. And I have a great example of that in the movie The Princess Bride, which is probably one of the greatest movies of all time. There's a scene at the top of the cliff when the Dread Pirate Roberts and the Spaniard have a sword fight. And in most of society, when two men have a conflict, it's portrayed that you're up there trash talking and try to demean your opponent and whoever it is that you're against in every way possible. But those two guys had an incredible fight to the death. They're guys at the very top of their game, and they gave each other compliments throughout that fight. 3 different times they paused and compliment each other's strength and style and just ability with the sword. They never trash talked. And at the end of it, they had a fair contest, and one of them walked away a winner and one walked away a loser, but they both respected each other. And it's because when you're confident and you know who you are and you trust who you are, respecting someone else's game does not take anything away from your game. And I think that that's something that I didn't understand most of my life. And so I always felt that I had to use everything available to me to try to sway someone's opinion about who I am. But the reality is none of that stuff is necessary. And if I'm displaying the rage, even if it's justified, that I'm a victim of an injustice in some way, it's really not going to accomplish any of my goals. So I need to understand the why behind the what and take a good look at how I am going to best negotiate my way through this to a satisfactory outcome, rather than just trying to Hulk out on everybody.
I find it interesting that you would bring up the word negotiate relative to solving this problem, as it were, of rage. A lot of the guys listening are probably thinking, as I am also, and perhaps you'll agree with this, that not all rage is created equal. There are levels of rage, there are feelings of rage, attitudes of rage directed at a certain person for doing them wrong, someone who's victimized us. There are feelings or attitudes of rage directed toward an entire race or gender or ethnicity of people, or towards a former job, or towards something I have to do that I don't want to do. something that's coming up that I'm worried about, and it's just causing me to get more and more upset. And a lot of guys in particular are listening to this show because they want to get better with women. And sometimes women have done us wrong. Sometimes we've never had the success with women that we wanted to. There's a guy or two out there in this audience, I'm sure, Justin, who's already feeling a little rage because your buddy Stevie gets to bang all these hot chicks. And he's like, yeah, well, you know what? I can't even get any of them to approve of me enough to even talk to me, let alone be arm in arm with me and me showing them off like arm candy and taking them to bed later. And that probably made them pretty upset. And yet what you just said hit the nail on the head so perfectly that I want to repeat it. It may be a bit of a paraphrase, but what you basically said was no one ever solved the problem behind the rage or the issue that's causing the rage with the rage. Being more angry about it, going and raging about it, never solved the problem. You got to handle the rage before you handle the problem. And indeed, all these guys, men going their own way, red-pilled guys, manosphere, it's all women's fault. It's not very manly to blame everybody else for something that's in your control to take care of. But again, it's this feeling of powerlessness, isn't it? It's this feeling that I don't have any control. This is all outside of my circle of influence. I'm a victim here. I'm not someone who has agency over this issue and can do something about it. So all this leads to my question for you, Justin, which is, what do we do about this? If we're feeling rage, if we're feeling like, we're hurting here, if we feel like there's a wound that needs to heal, what do we do to take back control of our feelings and indeed what happens to us next, our destiny?
I'm going to start my answer with another example from my life. And I spent 7 years working as a mechanic at a military base. And the supervisor that I worked for was just an unbelievable over-the-top control freak. He's another one of those people, just like my dad, that felt like he had to dominate everyone around him all day, every day to justify his authority as the supervisor. And as you can imagine, that triggered the hell out of me. And so I went to work every day raging against that guy, hating him, despising him, and just struggling every second of every day, and it was exhausting. And I spent 7 years doing that. And thank God there was a big contractor layoff, and I lost my job over that because I never, ever would have left. But when I'm able to get a 30,000-foot view on what's happening there, like there is a tiny obstacle in my way, which is one person who has his own set of insecurities that he's enacting out on everybody else. And then there's me who's being triggered by that with my insecurities, and I am just struggling against him in this futile thing. Neither one of us could ever give up or back off. But it was so incredibly pointless. All it did was make us both miserable for 7 years. And what a gargantuan waste of time and energy when I look at what I could have accomplished with that energy in that time frame. So I think step one is trying to get some perspective on what it is that you're angry about. And was I justified in my anger and the way he treated me and everybody else in that shop? Absolutely. That guy was an asshole every second of every day. And I could justify that till the cows come home, but it's not going to change anything. I'm still going to have a negative experience. So I think for me, it's important to try to get some perspective on the problem and understand, is this worth going to the mat over day? Is this worth fighting to the death over day after day? And the answer for 99% of things is no, it's not. I made a lot of money at that job. It was the best paying job in my area, so I felt trapped. But I absolutely could have valued peace of mind over the top dollar and quit that job and gone to work anywhere else. I have a transferable skill set that'll get me anywhere I need to go in life. And that's just one town, and there's a million towns in the world that I could go to. So these things that we feel like are trapping us is generally us trapping ourselves. And I think the more we can become self-aware and understand what's really happening on the inside and what's happening in the world around us and what we can control, we have a lot more control than we realize. We just have to be willing to make some hard decisions and take actions that sometimes bring some pain of their own. But ultimately, I walked away from that job. I got forced away from that job, and I wound up in a much better place. And I resent sometimes the amount of time that I wasted trying to be right rather than choosing to be happy.
Stubbornness isn't a healing emotion, is it?
It is not. Nope. And when you're unwilling to change your mind about anything, you're never going to make any progress in life. You're going to stay stuck in that same problem. But I think the key to success is being willing to look at what you believe and what you're doing, and being willing to change your mind about something and do something different. That's the only way that things are ever going to change, because the whole insanity thing is, doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. I think so many of us do that all day, every day, and are frustrated by it. But the truth is, you got to do something different. And change is hard, but change is also good.
Yeah, I've often said that the worst personality flaw anybody can ever have is the inability to be coachable or teachable, because then you're left with all the rest of your personality flaws forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, in my mind, it's kind of the opposite dynamic of what do you do if a genie grants you 3 wishes? The first wish would be, I wish for as many wishes as I want. That's kind of the opposite of saying, hey, you know what? I'm not going to hear what you have to say. I'm not going to hear any teaching, coaching, or entertain any well-meaning criticism of who I am or what I'm about, because I'm just too stubborn, or I'm just don't want to hear it, or I'm just not open to it, because then, none of your wishes will be granted. You'll be stuck with who you are and all of the continuing patterns of despair and disaster that you've always had to deal with previously. There's no growth potential there at all, right?
That's right. And I think that feeds right into the idea that, if we admit that we're wrong, if we admit that we need to change something, that perhaps there's a better way to do something, that's an acknowledgement that we were wrong. And we feel like that's a sign of weakness. And that's really not true at all. The most successful people in the world are the ones who are willing to change course and find something that works better. And the ones that don't get anywhere are the ones that refuse to change because someone might perceive that they were wrong to begin with. And that's just another insecurity presenting itself. The more I can acknowledge you have a better idea than I do, and maybe I should try things your way, the more successful I'm going to be in life and the more happy. My unwillingness to acknowledge that maybe I'm not doing something the best way that it could be done is me trapping myself in my present.
Yeah, in these situations where we have such a hard time giving up the approval-seeking mentality and the syndromic detrimental social effects that come from that, once we finally let go of that and we do that scary thing of letting go whether people care about our accomplishments or not, and we give away credit to someone else, or we're vulnerable in the best way possible enough to ask for help, it's so cathartic and such an eye-opener when we realize, hey, that went pretty well. People responded better to me, not worse. I didn't get ridiculed and told, see, you're terrible, you're awful, because I gave someone else the credit. Or I said, hey, you know what? You're better at this than I am. Help me out here. Or I want to deal with this so I get better at it. People don't say, well, see, you are a terrible person. You are worthless. They go, oh, yeah, man, cool. I feel respected. Thank you. Now I want to be your friend. Now I want to spend more time with you. Now I like hanging out with you more because you aren't so unbearably difficult to socialize with, among other things. It's almost like magic. Yet, like I tell guys who come to me and say, I can't get any women to go out with me. And my first question back to them is, well, how many women have you asked out? And they say none. A lot of times when guys say, hey, no one is helpful to me, nobody gives me approval, I am not able to succeed at anything, a lot of times the root cause of that state of affairs is they haven't gone about actually trying or attempting or making an effort to see that success. There's a fear of failure or even a fear of success. What if I do this and I do it right? Then what? Certainly that affects a lot of guys with women because they're like, well, if I ask a woman out and then she says yes, then, oh my God, I got the pressure of a first date. And how do I get her to have sex with me? And what if she rejects me at some point along the way? I'll feel even worse than I did before I asked her out. And as much as it pains me to say this, Justin, a lot of times it's the really intelligent guys whose brains tend to swirl around and they tend to overanalyze stuff who get themselves into this tizzy. But sure. It is indeed also a lot of times the guys who have been socialized as children in a way, perhaps you and I have, that, hey, you know what? The bar for success is perfection and it's just really hard to reach. And then we get into that habit and, it's just what we've been taught to believe. But, that decision to own this is usually the first step to the larger decision of healing this.
Absolutely. I could not have said that better. You know, these attitudes that we have about ourselves become a self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Oh, 100%.
We train people how to treat us. And when you go into a potential dating situation with the certainty that you're going to be rejected or you're going to fail, guess what? You're going to be rejected and you're going to fail because you're broadcasting that stuff. Whether you recognize it or not, you're telegraphing your self-beliefs onto someone else just by the way you conduct the conversation. And I'm watching my wife's best friend go through this at the moment. She's trying to date. And she's got a dating service that's finding these guys that meet all of her criteria as much as possible. But she's looking at it with a negative attitude, like, I don't know if I'm probably not going to like this guy because of this or that. And, he's probably not going to like me because of this or that. And so when you go into it with that hesitation, it's the same attitude like when you're trying a gross food or something you perceive as probably being gross, that you're expecting it to be bad. And therefore, it's going to be bad. And the other person is going to feed off of that energy. So until you get good with who you are and come at it with a positive attitude, yes, you're going to keep failing. You have to change the way that you perceive yourself and think about yourself before you can have a positive interaction with someone else.
Sounds like your wife's friend needs a quick read of Green Eggs and Ham.
Probably wouldn't hurt.
Yes, definitely. And speaking of books, gentlemen, I want to point you to Justin Long's excellent book, The Righteous Rage of a 10-Year-Old Boy, which you can find by following this link, mountaintoppodcast.com/long, Long. There you will find his book on Amazon and be able to get yourself a copy. I'm also going to put it at the top of the queue on my own Amazon storefront, which you can find at mountaintoppodcast.com/Amazon. Great book, great words of wisdom from a man who basically walks the talk. Mr. Justin Long from Gainesville, Florida. Thank you so much for being a part of this show today. It's been fantastic, Justin.
Thank you, Scott. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this stuff.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is going to be a show that has an impact on a lot of guys listening, and perhaps in ways they didn't expect coming in. So excellent, excellent stuff. Gentlemen, head on over to mountaintoppodcast.com and visit our sponsors. Origin in Maine, Jocko Willink's company, will outfit you with the best jeans and boots you've ever worn. Also, Jiu-Jitsu Gi's cool equipment to outfit your home gym. Also, don't forget about Origin Labs, the best supplements I've ever taken. I feel like $1 million every day because of the vitamins I'm taking, courtesy of my good friends at Origin in Maine, and you should check it out. Also, Hero Soap has the greatest body wash you've ever used. They have the greatest soap you'll ever use. It's all healthy, no unnatural ingredients. You will smell like a man, and here's what else. They now have pet wash. So, I don't know, your dog can smell like a man too, or at least smell like a dog in a good way. Instead of smelling like a wet dog when you give it a bath, which you're going to have to do, guys. We all have to give our dogs baths around here. It will smell fresh and clean. So when you have women over, you will smell good. Your dog will smell good. And the next thing you know, life will be good. That's there for you at Hero Soap. You can get 10% off your order with either Origin in Maine or Hero Soap by using the coupon code MOUNTAIN10 while you're at mountaintoppodcast.com. Guys, listen, talk to me for free for 25 minutes. I'm exactly who you think I'm going to be, just like you figured out on this show today. I have a past. I have things I've gotten over to get to where I am today. I'm still on my journey, just like you are. When you talk to me, we're going to have an honest conversation about those things in your life that you would like to improve upon, those things in life you would like to get past, those obstacles that are in the way still of you getting the right woman in your life. And I don't know, maybe getting the career track going that you want to be on, having the adventures you want to have in your life. All of that is wide open blue sky when you get on my calendar and talk to me for free for 25 minutes. And if it takes longer than 25 minutes, so be it. I want to talk to you guys. I talk to you guys all the time, many of you every week. And over the years, we've gotten great success for so many men in exactly the ways they wanted to reach that success in. It all starts with a call with me for 25 minutes, which you can schedule when you visit mountaintoppodcast.com. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.